Hello and welcome to the latest Gramophone podcast. I'm James Jolly, Gramophone's editor-in-chief, and this month I travelled to Paris to interview the conductor François-Xavier Roth about his new recording of Saint-Saëns. But first, earlier this year, the British pianist Benjamin Grosvenor, aged just 19, was signed by Decca, the first British pianist to be so honoured since the likes of Clifford Curzon and Maura Limpany. Martin Cullingford went to meet him at the Royal Academy of Music to discuss his new recording and his forthcoming Proms appearance. But first, he called in on gramophone critic Bryce Morrison and asked him just what makes this young musician so special.
We first heard of Benjamin Grosvenor when, in 2004 and aged just 11, he won the keyboard final of the BBC Young Musician of the Year award. And then 2 or 3 years ago, I remember that you phoned me to absolutely insist that we had to hear a recording he had made called This and That.
Yes. I'd already heard Benjamin, you mentioned in the BBC competition, as whatever age he was then, very
age
young.
11.
Yes, playing the Ravel G Major Concerto. Really an enormous talent. But when you hear something like that, without being cynical at all, you think, yes, well, the number of people who showed this sort of vitality and brilliance and an instinctive type of commitment when they're very young. Well, what happens later? Well, of course, what happened later was there are a lot of private recordings of Benjamin, which I heard, playing a very, very wide repertoire, and I was very stunned by this. And then when this record appeared, called This and That, with Kapustin and Chopin and Albanese Iberia, the first book, I was absolutely stunned by it because the playing had moved on again a long way and was so personal. The technical expertise is enormous, but that's, a lot of people now have, well, I wouldn't call it technical expertise, mechanical expertise, which is a different thing. Ben has a colossal technique, but everything is used for an expressive and beautiful and very personal effect.
We're here in the Royal Academy of Music. Tell me a little bit about what it actually means to be studying at this point in your development and career.
I've been at the Academy now actually since I was 13, or going on 14, and when I started here initially I came up once a week for one-to-one lessons with certain teachers. I had lessons with Christopher Alton, just normal piano lessons, and then I also had lessons with a guy called Daniel Ben-Pienaar, a South African, very talented South African pianist who I started off having sort of lessons in which we'd analyse recordings with respect to interpretation, and also sort of the fundamental stuff that's taught in contextual studies, kind of music theory, that kind of thing. Then when I was 16 I decided it would be time to start a degree, so I started the B-Mus course here, and of course as part of I continued having lessons with Christopher Elton and I continued having lessons with Daniel Ben. So the only thing which was really very different for me was that it was more academic stuff that I'd be doing, and so for me that's what I've got out of the degree more than anything else, because otherwise it hasn't been much different to the setup I had before. Because now I've done things like conducting and certain academic electives and learned a lot about in techniques and analysis, for example. That's what's really been very useful for me. I've been with Christopher Elton since I was 11, and of course things the way the lessons sort of pan out, and his teaching approach has changed a lot because I've changed a lot as a musician and I've improved a lot as a musician. And I think now we're at the stage where the lesson is for really a time at which I can come along and discuss my ideas with another very experienced musician, which is very useful for.
So, to your first recording for Decca, which will include Ravel's Gaspard de Lanois and Chopin's Four Scherzi, how and why did you choose the repertoire that you have?
Well, I chose them initially because I've been performing the pieces a lot, and they seem to work well, and audiences seem to like them, and they seem to work Well, I didn't do all 4 scherzos. I was going through a period of just doing 3 of them actually, because I think each scherzo is like a masterwork in its own right. There's not really any set, although they're often grouped together as a set. They're not linked by keys or anything. They're almost separate works, and I think it's fine to split them up in that way. So what I do is, and I've actually done this on the disc as well, I put little pieces in between them. Each scherzo has a nocturne between them on the disc.
Okay.
It shows, I think, an interesting idea.
And the nocturnes that you chose, do they relate to the relevant scherzo?
They don't necessarily. I mean, when I started off with this I didn't have this idea initially. The idea of the disc initially was that you'd have the 4 scherzi at the beginning and the Gaspard at the end. And of course, Chopin and Ravel, there's not really a case for putting the 2 side by side and comparing them. And so I felt they need to be linked in some way. So I wanted to introduce a connection between them. The obvious composer to go to was Liszt. So the way the disc maps out is that you have Chopin, and then you have Chopin as viewed through the prism of Liszt. So you have some Chopin songs arranged by Liszt, and then you have a little late piece of Liszt, 2-minute long piece, En Rêve, which Liszt's late style is very experimental. I mean, he wrote a lot of very strange music at this time. En Rêve is quite harmonically experimental, and through that it almost looks forward to Ravel, which is why it's nice as a little link piece.
Now, you first gained fame for winning the keyboard final of the BBC Young Musician of the Year award in 2004, aged just 11. An astonishingly young age. How did you decide how to progress your development in your career since then? There must have been a lot of opportunities and pressure that followed.
Of course, I was offered a lot of concerts in the immediate aftermath of the competition, and my parents felt that I always wanted to perform. It was something I seemed to thrive on at that stage, and so it would have been silly to simply not let me do it when I really wanted to. And so they understood that there was a lot of pressures I could find myself suddenly under. So the idea was that we'd accept concerts, but they'd be grouped into 3 blocks a year, sort of 3 patches of concert with different repertoire in each. And what this allowed me to do then was to have a long period of time with no pressure, just to learn the stuff, and then I go and play them in concerts, which was a setup that worked very well for me. And it's only recently, we've already decided that now's the time for the career to seriously take off, that I've started breaking out of this mould and accepting more concerts.
And did you just feel that you felt ready, that you felt you'd reached the stage in your performing where you wanted to make that important step?
Yes, I did. I think it sort of just felt like the right time, especially it kind of coincided with being accepted on the New Generation Artist Scheme, as a matter of fact, which of course is quite demanding in terms of repertoire, and suddenly you have to record a lot of stuff. It just felt like the natural time to start moving forward, I think.
And that scheme, the BBC New Generation Artist Scheme, it's both a very supportive scheme, but it gives you lots of opportunities, doesn't it, to work with other musicians, as well as to explore what recording and broadcasting means.
It's great in so many ways, really. I mean, I've had so much fun. Especially for me actually in the studio, because the good thing about the BBC setup is that then because it's not a CD, because it's for broadcast, they don't have such an emphasis on perfection, and so in the studio they try to replicate live performance. It's almost a live performance, but not quite. So I mean, it's live performance in that they really like long takes, but of course if something goes wrong you can do it again, so there's no pressure there. I mean, you can go there and you can have fun without having to sort of analyse every single little detail to make sure everything's completely perfect, as you might have to do in a CD recording. And yet you don't have the pressure of a live performance there.
Yeah. And as well as obviously the forthcoming Decca disc, many people are going to be hearing you perform at the Proms this year. The opening night, that's quite an honour.
It is a great honour, yes. I'm very lucky to be asked. I mean, I'm looking forward to it, of course, but it's like quite daunting.
Yeah, yes. And you're appearing later on as well in the Proms season, aren't you, performing the Britain Piano Concerto?
Yes, I'm performing the Britain Concerto on August the 6th with the National Youth Orchestra. Which should be a great concert, because after all, the oldest players in the orchestra are only going to probably be a few months younger than me, because I've just turned 19. I'm sure some of them will just be turning 19 as well. So it should be a lot of fun. I'm sure it will be full of youthful energy, the performance.
Indeed. And I should have said that the opening night concert is the Liszt second piano concerto.
The opening night concert is this second, which is on July the 15th.
Fabulous. Well, Benjamin, thank you very much indeed.
An excerpt there from Liszt's En Rêve, and you can hear the whole performance, along with works by Chopin and Ravel, on Benjamin Grosvenor's first disc for Decca.